Today we are back at Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis, Indiana to visit the grave of one of the biggest literary icons of all time. And believe me, his grave is definitely befitting of an icon. His works include Little Orphan Annie, and in the literary world, he is a legend. Today we visit the grave of James Whitcomb Riley. I would love to know if any of you are familiar with Mr. Riley. Please let me know in the comments whether you have or had not heard of him. I would love to know that. Born October 7th, 1849 in Greenfield, Indiana, James Whitcomb Riley was the third of 6 children. Riley's father was a lawyer and actually served in the Indiana House of Representatives. James Riley's uncle Martin was a poet, and Riley developed an interest in poetry due to him. Although known as a literary genius, Riley wasn't an especially good student. His critics would later say that this would help make him successful because it allowed him to write in a simpler fashion, which would endear him to common people. Unfortunately, Riley's mother would pass away, and Riley and his father had a very contentious relationship, including his father's disapproval of his poetry career. Riley left the family home and would start performing a series of jobs to make ends meet. He would join a local theater and opened a business where he painted signs. He believed sales would make more money, and unfortunately, he became somewhat of a huckster. Joining a company that sold patent medicines, he traveled and would put on shows selling miracle cures and at times being completely dishonest in his practices, even claiming to be formerly blind and cured by his product. During late 1875, Riley began earnestly looking for work as a poet, and he contacted Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, seeking an endorsement from whom he considered the greatest living poet. After many attempts, he finally received a response of praise. Touting the endorsement, he was able to start selling poems to larger newspapers. He was offered a job by the Indianapolis Journal. He continued to submit poems to larger newspapers, which was often met with rejection. He even devised a plot, pretending to find a long-lost poem of Edgar Allan Poe. Once the plot was uncovered, Riley's reputation took a major hit. This damage caused a further decline, and he began drinking heavily. He managed to be invited to speak an event after Indiana Governor James Williams. Riley performed a poem that was very well received. This led to him writing a play which exposed him to more audiences. His success on the lecture circuit, in which he would perform both comedy and drama, led to even more success. His spectacular reading talent began to contribute to him having larger audiences at his performances. By 1880, his poems began reaching national audiences. By the 1890s, Riley was a very well-known and best-selling children's author. And honestly, Riley's story is filled with ups and downs. His triumphs on the speaking circuit and the performance circuit were equally weighed down with his alcoholism and financial problems. Even through all that he experienced, his legacy is immense. He eventually became wealthy from his books, and when he toured, he could triple his income. Even after retirement, Riley made occasional appearances. Publications would start referring to Riley as the national poet and the poet laureate of America. In 1901, Riley was diagnosed with a nervous disorder and prescribed large amounts of rest. For the next decade, he rarely traveled and began battling depression, medicating with alcohol. After one massive stroke, he suffered a second one on July 22, 1916. James Whitcomb Riley passed away on July 23, 1916. His death made headlines all over the country. President Woodrow Wilson wrote a note to his family on behalf of the entire nation. He lie in state at the Indiana State House, with Abraham Lincoln being the only other person to have that honor. 35,000 people would file past his casket to pay their respects. He was taken to Crown Hill Cemetery and buried on top of this hill, which is the highest point in Indianapolis. And you can see here, this monument and this place, this final resting place, is just massive. I mean, it does represent the legacy that he leaves behind. One thing that really did surprise me in learning about his life was the fact that he did have ups and downs. You know, when someone, especially when you do research and you go to a cemetery visit like this, you see a monument like this, you don't really take into account the downs. You always think about the ups. This guy did have a lot of very popular works that he wrote. I mean, there was one called The Raggedy Man, and then also Little Orphan Annie. I mean, we've all heard of that. That story's been adapted into films and in print. Just anywhere you can find media, you can find that story. But it is an honor to visit the grave of James Whitcomb Riley today here in Indianapolis, Indiana. I didn't realize this, although maybe I should have. This is the highest point in Indianapolis, and most definitely you can tell it's the highest point in this cemetery. This is actually the view from the grave, looking down the road that you travel to get up to the grave. So just an absolutely beautiful area, a beautiful monument, and like I said in the beginning, it is definitely befitting of a legend here. I mean, there are all kinds of notable graves. I've still got more stories to bring from this cemetery, but I've already had several on here, and without a doubt, I mean, this is the most extravagant monument that you will see here. I do want to thank you all for joining. I want to hear your all's comments because I have heard of some of his works. I'm sure a lot of you out there have. I didn't know very much about him at all. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, I do want to know if you all have heard of him. Please leave that answer in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Other places as well. Facebook, Instagram, my merchandise shop. I do have links that I'm going to leave in the description where you can find me. I do want to thank you all so much for watching and joining me on my journeys. We've got a lot more coming up, and we are getting very, very close to 15,000 subscribers. Still, I cannot believe it. I just want to thank you all so much. Without you all, there would be no use to do my channel. So I'm just so glad that I'm able to bring you all these visits. And I've said this before, and I've been saying this in my videos. All of my videos are 100% cemetery related. So I'm a true cemetery channel, and I want to thank you all for joining me on my journeys. I appreciate it. I will see you all again very soon.